Hey guys, welcome to another video. In this video, we're going to be covering something really interesting, a report that you may have not even come across before previously in your Google Search Console account. We're going to be covering the Crawl Stats report. So this report is a little bit hidden, especially if you don't really know where to look. So if you look overall in your main tab section, you're not really going to see it anywhere. You see pages, sitemaps, a few other bits and pieces, links. It's all the way hidden in the settings. That's right, you got to hit settings. You go through here, and we're going to dedicate this entire video to this. So the report basically is in this section here. So just a quick note, your actual Google Search Console account may not have this for a few reasons. Number one could be that your Google Search Console account that you've created is too new and it hasn't gathered data. Another reason could be that it's not on the root domain. So what do I mean by this? So let's just say if you're working on a website or you have your own website and the folder structure is .com/au, for example, or /nz, so like a geo subfolder structure, it doesn't work and it only works for root level domains. So just keep that in mind. So let's jump into this report. So this might be the first time that you're seeing this report, and it's actually interesting to note all of this information because it's very, very critical to know what's going on here. So the crawl stats is a bit self-explanatory. It gives you information about how Google crawls your website, so some statistics. So let's quickly just go through some of it here. We've got the crawl requests, download, average response time. I'll be covering this in a little bit more detail very shortly, and a graph that gives you the requests. You have host status, response codes, file types, purpose, Googlebot. So let's quickly go through this report and why I think it's really important for you to know about it. So main reason is that this information you're not really going to get anywhere else outside of a server log analysis, and not everyone has access to that because you might be working on a client website and a lot of that information is hidden by hosting providers, and you got to get IT access and a whole bunch of other things to get that data. And to basically go through that data, it's a bit of a headache. So this is nice. It's basically compartmentalized in different areas, and you can look at this key information. So let's quickly go over why this is important. It gives you key information of how Google crawls your website and how these bots come, visit, and what they do. So crawl requests. So what is that? It's essentially the number of crawl requests that your website has. And this just means basically the amount of times Google has essentially crawled pages on your website. And this also includes duplicates. So what does that mean? It could mean that at one stage, Google maybe couldn't have crawled a specific URL and then it had to revisit that URL at a later date, and it could have contributed to the crawl request. Another thing is total download size. So this means the total size of all the files and resources downloaded during the crawl in a specific period of time. This also includes HTML, CSS files, etc., images, everything there. And then average response time in microseconds. So this is basically the average response time for a crawl request for the page to be retrieved. So this does not include retrieving pages and resources such as scripts, such as CSS, JavaScript, images, or other embedded content, or the rendering process. So that's basically the process before a page gets indexed, just if you're not familiar with that. I can make a different video about that later on, but we're not going to cover that in this particular video. So if you click through all of these buttons, this kind of reminds you of the other information that you can see in terms of a layout for the performance tab. When you see on how many clicks your website's getting, you can this definitely has that same layout, so it's very easy to follow. So as you can see here in this particular website, I haven't added in any new pages or anything in a long time, but there's a few spikes and dips, and a bigger spike around the 2nd of September. So overall, as you can see with that big spike, of crawl requests means that there's also a lot more downloads happening and a lot more responses happening from that perspective. So that all aligns there. This is very important information because if there's an abnormal amount of requests, this could potentially give you an idea that you might need to investigate something relating to your website's performance. You might have to troubleshoot a few things. This could be related to potentially looking at your robots.txt file. Maybe you've added a lot of pages on your website. Maybe you've removed some commands from your robots.txt file, added some things in the robots.txt file, potentially removed a lot of pages from your website, which may create some abnormalities in your crawl requests, and in turn, your download size and your average response time. Another bit of information you have is how Google interacts with your host status. So this just gives you information about hosting, which is a little bit different from your hosting provider. So this could basically give you an idea of how Google interacts with a robots.txt file. Has it had any issues when it interacts with this document? It's really important since it gives Google bots all the information it needs of what it can and can't crawl or what it should go and visit. So if you click here, has a green tick. So please note that these ticks could also be grayed out or red if there's any issues. So this is just one thing to take into consideration when looking at these ticks, because it could give you a bit of a hint for issues down the line. So if there's been a recent issue, it's not a full green circle. It will just be a tick with no green circle as it filled in. So as you can see, all these green circles are filled in, means no issues. If it's encountered an issue within the last few days, it could be a slight one. If it's encountered more than one issue, it goes into a red asterisk. Not red asterisk, red exclamation point. So definitely these are fine here. Going on to the DNS resolution, basically gives an idea if there's any issues with a domain name server that it's encountered, and so far there's been no issues at the acceptable fail rate. And then finally we have this last bit of information here, which is just server connectivity. So if there's any issues connecting with your server, so basically any issues in crawling your website, has your server been down, has your website been down? If it has, then your server connectivity issue would be spiking up here when Google interacts with it. So these are just things just to kind of keep a pulse on your website, just to see if there's any issues. Moving down to response, so it gives you an idea of these response codes. So in these response codes, there might be something out of the ordinary coming up here. So some of them could be good, some of them could be requiring your attention, and others could be bad. So what do I mean by that? So at this case, let's quickly go through what I have here. This website hasn't changed in a while. So as you can see, 91% of all crawled responses are 200, which is fine. 4% are 302, so they're temporarily redirecting. 301, so permanently redirecting, and 304 means that it hasn't modified, the page hasn't changed at all since it's essentially last being crawled. But so what it means is that the page hasn't changed since the last crawl request, and that's what the 304 means. But other things that could potentially be things to look at is anything regarding 404 errors. It could be unauthorized statuses, so something along the lines of 500s. So this could relate to server issues, DNS responses, or fetch errors. So these are things that you'd have to kind of look into a little bit more. So in certain circumstances, 404s may be fine, may not be an issue because you've 404 them from the perspective of you're not intending on having them redirected. These are pages that are just 404'd and are going to be dropped from Google's index. There could be 404s in this report that you're not aware of. Maybe something's happened and you need to investigate. 500 errors could be ones regarding server issues. There could be something that you just need to keep a quick check on and observe over time. And there could be other issues relating to DNS or fetch errors and things that would require more of your attention, and you have to look into that. What's interesting here is by file type. So it gives an idea what type of files Google crawls. In this case, for this website, 32% HTML, 31% JavaScript, 14% images, 14% CSS, 1% syndication, and then this could be from an RSS feed, for example, and it could be such things as other file types, so file types that are just not specified. But this is really interesting because this could be information that you need to understand in terms of optimizing how Google is crawling your website. This could be PDFs, Word documents, Excel documents, or other types of files. So far what you can see is how Google's crawling your website, the responses that it's receiving, and types of files. What's interesting to note here is you could definitely look at this information to understand, one, how Google's crawling your website, and you could definitely tweak some of this information. So for example, could be there's a lot of images being crawled. Not necessarily saying to change things, but just good to kind of understand how Google's looking at it, because if Google is crawling a lot of information that isn't necessarily giving value to users, to search engines, or something along those lines, you could definitely investigate by clicking on these elements and understanding exactly what is being crawled, because you could do tweaks to make sure that certain file types are being blocked if they're not important to any SEO value or any value whatsoever, and they're just on the website. You could have these blocked in robots or text or other means. Now going on to another aspect is by purpose. So by purpose is really interesting because you get two insights. You get refresh, so it means that Google is recrawling pages that it's visited previously, it's already discovered. That's 97% for this website. And another one is discover. So Google is crawling for discovery, which means it's trying to crawl, in this case, 3% of pages that it hasn't previously identified before. So this is really important and good to know, especially if you're creating a lot of content in your website. The discovery rate should be much higher. And if it isn't, and you are launching a lot of new pages on your website, and it's been a long time since you've launched these pages and the discovery rate is low, this could indicate you might need to adjust your crawling. Pages might need to be submitted to be crawled, or there could be other settings you might have to look into in Google Search Console, which will not be covered in this video, but this is just to give you a heads up. And it gives you an idea of what it's actually crawling. So in this case, it's crawling feeds, it's crawling the sitemap, it's crawling the homepage to identify any new particular pages it hasn't crawled previously. Then finally, we're going by Google bot type. So by Google bot type, there's lots of bots that could crawl your website. And I'm just kind of pulling up a list on the side here because I'm not familiar with all of them myself. So some of them could be, as we see here, page resource load, smartphone desktop image, and other ones could be ad bots. So if you're running some type of dynamic search ads, it could be store bots. If you have shopping, product shopping, on your website, and other types of ones, which such as video, images, smartphones, etc. So let's quickly go into this one, which is page resource load. So page resource load isn't necessarily got to do with anything when it's images or anything that relates to page speed. All page resource load is just a secondary fetch from Google of that specific page, and this relates to basically bits of information that helps the page render. So this could be CSS files, images, or anything for that rendering process, but this just isn't images by itself. This is just related to a second render of your website. So 45% of the entire Google bots that come to the website are ones that are coming for a second render, because this is important because it doesn't always render everything on the first time when it crawls your website. And the other one is your smartphone bot, desktop, and image bot that are coming through and specifically visiting and basically understanding what elements are coming onto the website. For me as a webmaster, it's just giving a good understanding of what bots are continuously visiting and how often. So if you just go here, you can see that a large spike and a big spike of total crawl requests that happened on the 2nd of September were actually all relating to a second render. So these are the CSS files, JavaScript files, and you can see about the types here: JavaScript, CSS, etc. So this is exactly why If we go back to the top, there was a massive spike here in crawl requests because a lot of it happened by page resource load. So this is why it's important to understand why this report, you should look at it from time to time. I'd say monthly, if you have a big website, even more frequently, because there's so much valuable information and it is quite hidden. And this is exactly why I wanted to put this video together. So if you gained a lot of if you've gained a lot of value from this video, please hit the like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a great one, guys. Bye.